Howdy and welcome back. I'm Oliver the Shoe Man, and today I'm going to be going over a step-by-step process of how to resole some cowboy boots. Here we have some Tecovas ostrich skin cowboy boots that obviously had a lot of wear. And today the customer chose to go with a Vibram 430 rubber sole instead of doing a leather sole like these originally came with. So it's going to be a longer form video, but stick around. I'm going to try to show you every single step of how we do this. I may fast forward some parts because it just takes a while to do that, but enjoy. All right, so I always like to start here at the top lift. The top lift is the rubber piece on the heel that you walk on and that wears down. And sometimes they come off easily, sometimes, like this time, they are on there good. So I use a little bit of acetone, just a little squirt, that helps to debond the rubber from the leather heel base. Like that. All right, now that's off. We'll be replacing that with some Vibram Cowboy heels. Those little holes have washers on the inside, so when you put it on and we nail it in there, it'll hold it nice and tight. Next step is to take the heel base off. Now you can take this off layer by layer, or if you have a heel prior, I like to run it. It's almost like a chisel, but it's not sharp at all. It's dull. It's just used to get in between the leather sole and the heel base. And I like to score the edges. And then some cobblers will go from here and lift up. That kind of affects the metal shank, which I'm going to show you here in a second. So I like to go from the back. Let's see if I can show you a better angle. And just literally pry up the heel base. It comes off all in one shot. And I'll take my marker. This is the left boot, and I'll write an L on there so that when I go to put it together, I know that this goes to the left boot. These nails are threaded nails. That is what holds the heel base on. I'm going to cut those for now, and then when I take the sole off, I will nail those through and then pull them out from the inside. While we have it off, let's pull out the sock liner. Sock lining is just a thin piece of leather or rubber. Not rubber, a thin leather with some padding on the inside that covers those nails. This is a full length, so when it's a full length, I just stick it at the toe instead of pulling it all the way out, because you only really don't need it back here. And so you have let me show you better. So now you have the leather sole and the heel rand, that black piece right there. And so we're going to use our heel prior again and score in between the leather sole and the heel rand. I'm going to take a pair of, I think these are called nippers, and pry it up. Notice I have my thumb right here, because if you don't, this will come up too. You want to keep this in its place so that you don't lose the shape or where it was nailed into place, because the heel base follows that pattern and you don't want to lose that. Right here in the shank, pulling everything up. And then when you get to the welt section where the welt starts, we will take a knife. I like to use a razor blade. It's very dangerous, but it helps quite a bit. And since a lot of these stitches were walked on and broken, you don't have to cut very much of them. But carefully cutting this sole off. just like that, you have the sole off. You have some, well, that's the shank that I was telling you about. You have the cork, and those nails. You have some brass nails that were holding the leather sole on. I like to use the heel reins or heel prier to pry up and scrape up all the old cork, because we have to replace that with new cork. Works out great. And then we could grab and pull out these brass tacks that was holding the sole to the waist. Now Tecovas uses both a brass tack and a wooden lemonwood peg, which is a great way to secure the waist to the shoe. I give the option to the customers. If they want me to use lemonwood pegs, I'll use lemonwood pegs. But it's more expensive for the lemonwood pegs because it's more time to do those than just to put some brass tacks in there. This time around, we're going to be doing just the brass tacks. Now you see I was hammering those threaded nails down, and on the inside, you grab the nippers and you pull them out. Now sometimes this takes a while because it's going to be, you going in there blind, you get to go by feel. And so what you do, you have the metal last, you bring it to the edge of the metal last, and then you can hear that it's hitting the metal last. So you move it and you hammer it through. Then you go to the inside and you fish around for them. When I first was learning how to do this, man, I would sit here for 5 to 10 minutes trying to pull them out, trying to get the pliers around them. But with practice, I was able to get really good at them. And so that looks like they're all out. All right, the next step is to remove the welt threads. The threads from the welt, which these is what the sole was stitched onto. And so we have to remove them since nothing is being held onto them anymore. They're just cut stitches. And that way when we go to stitch new soles on, the welt will have one row of stitching on there instead of 2 just jammed together. It doesn't look good. It actually weakens the welt too, so the sole could actually fall off of the welts. So you want to do it this way. It's not the funnest time in the world, but it's the right way to do it. And sometimes you get really lucky, like right now where it all just came out in one shot. Beautiful. All right, at this point you can examine the shoe, see if there's anything else it may need. The welt needs to be replaced. You can see now it needs to be restitched. You can look at that now. Everything looks to be in good shape. So we're going to take some cork, new cork sheets, and glue it into place. This is the shank, which is actually broken, so we'll have to replace that. And then yeah, so I'll get all that glued in, and then we'll be ready for the new soles. Okay, so we got everything ready to go. This is the old shank, it's broken. It's gonna be the new one. I go ahead and put it inside here. It's a little bit longer than the original, but it should work very well. Now you see this one had a plastic piece giving it with a little bit of shape. So when the sole comes on, it kind of follows that shape. So I took the old sole, I cut it up, and I made one out of leather. So we'll go ahead and put that on top, kind of as a shank cover. See? In this front section, we'll get a sheet of cork. All right. We sand the cork flush. We'll clean up this heel rand, lightly sand the welts, get some glue on this, get some glue on the new sole, and then we'll be ready to stick the soles on. Okay. For those of you that are curious, this is the glue that I use, Renia. And I mix it into a bottle, dilute it a little bit with some acetone, and it works great for leathers, plastics, rubbers. I'm gonna take some acetone and clean off this heel rand, this plastic piece, so that the glue will stick properly to it. Missed a little welt thread there. Glad I cut that. All right, then we just like you're painting it on. Now, if you don't know who Tony Wyatt is from Wyatt and Dad Collar Company, they're another shoe repair business in one of the two Carolinas, south or north, I can't remember. But if you don't know who they are, definitely go watch their page if you like this type of content. They have really great videos. The reason I bring them up is because Tony has a saying that he uses when he was learning how to fix shoes and when he trains other people, is glue won't stick or glue ain't act. And so cleaning off the rubber with acetone as well. So you want to make sure that there's a good coat of glue all over the shoe, the bottom of the shoe, and all over the sole, so that when you stick them together, they'll actually stick. This is a contact cement, so you gotta get a coat on there, let it dry for 15 to 20 minutes. Then you you heat them up and then press them together. Now that has had time to dry, we have heated it up. I use a heat box, just a box with heat lamps in it. You can use a heat gun, hair dryer, whichever one works best for you. But the goal with these soles is to make sure that this lug pattern ends up in the center of the boot. And so sometimes it can be kind of tricky to do so. I have done so many of these, it's kind of easier for me, but what you can do is actually take the old sole, trace it out on top, and then cut it right outside that tracing, and that way you know that you'll have it centered properly. Okay, now what we're going to do is take you over to my, let's see if I can set you up somewhere. Okay, I know there's a wheel in the way, but this is the best angle I'm gonna be able to get. This is my 5-in-1. This has a little roller right here. This comes up, and the welt, you see how there's a gap right there in the sole? You put it on top of the welt in the sole, and you roll it with this handle, and it puts pressure on the welt in the sole and just brings it together. You can do it around the heel rand. And now there's no gaps between the welt and the sole. So now you can take your knife and trim it. I use a little roofing blade, I think this is what it's called, to cut the sole all the way around it. That way we're not spending so much time on the sander, on the sander. All right, and just like that, We got it centered pretty good. So I'm gonna do a rough sanding, then we'll come back. Rough sanding is just sanding the edges flush with the welt and the heel rand. So we'll shape it, and then we'll be ready to stitch it. Got it rough sanded. Now you just barely want to hit the welt. You don't want to sand it too much because then you can narrow the boot, and you don't want to do that. Next is going to be shaping the waist. So you see the welt stops right there. Heel rand starts right here. It's known as the waist of the shoe. Let's see if I get some more light on there. Yeah, there you go. Waist of the shoe. A lot of times companies will round that section out or thin it out so it's nice and thin right here in the waist of the shoe, I guess. So I have here a round trimmer blade. Trimmer blade is this. It has like 16 different blades, and it spins really fast, and it trims the sole. This one has a round edge, so when you go ahead and put the sole in there, it'll round off the sole. Okay, and now you can see, got a nice round edge right there at the waist. Next, we're going to get set up to do our stitching. This is my Landis L outsole machine. And I'm just going to adjust the machine so that we could stitch it properly. So we'll run the needle through it, the foot, and make a marking where that needle went through. Make sure and double check it's where we want it on the underside, which looks like it's good. And then we'll come back over here with our round trimmer blade. We also have this, which is a groover. And so we adjust the groover, which it looks like it's going to hit right where we want it. Okay, now that we have our machine set up, our groove stitched, we have a brown thread on the bottom, then a rust thread on top, which we're stitching the shoes upside down. So the rust will actually be right here on the bottom of the boot. The brown will be on top, just like we want it to. And so now we get all set up and run the machine. Okay, so it's hard to tell because it blends in very well, but we actually hit all of the original holes on the welt, which is what we want. And then there's that countersunk stitching, which that rust color matches the boot just fine. So it's a really cool detail, and most people won't notice unless you look at the bottom of the shoe. Now, the next step is to take our heel blocks, mark out where it's going to end. And then we get to nail the waist and the back heel. Always make sure that heel lining is out, or the sock lining is out of the way. For underneath the heel, we're going to be using some steel overhead steel overhead tacks. These are clinching nails, which means they got a really fine tip. And so when it goes into the boot and it hits the metal last that's underneath here, it crimps and turns into a J, like a J pattern, and like crimps back into this shoe so that you don't feel it on the inside of the shoe when you're wearing it, which is important because no one wants to walk on nails. So we'll do this whole back heel section just like that. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now for the waist, this is where we're going to use these brass oval head tacks. And the reason we use brass here at the shank and steel underneath the heel is because steel obviously rusts when it comes into contact with water. And since these nails here in the back are going to be covered by the heel base, we don't have to worry about them rusting unless whoever's wearing these boots is just sitting in water for an extended amount of time. But these here in the shank area, we'll see some water, so we don't want them rusting out the shoe. That one bent a little bit. These can also be a pain in the butt sometimes if not done properly. Alrighty. So I do, depending on the boot, sometimes I'll do a single row. Sometimes I'll do a double row of brass nails. These Tecovas had a double row, so that's why I'm doing a double row of brass nails. And earlier when I was talking about lemon wood pegs, with rubber soles you can't do lemon wood pegs because the rubber kind of just goes around the lemon wood peg. These oval heads will actually grab onto the rubber and not let it, I guess, go around. So when it comes to rubber soles, you have to use these oval heads. See there? You got the steel. That's the line where the heel base is going to end. We got the brass. And now we're ready to put our heels on our heel bases. We'll clean this side up and then attach these to the boot. Now time to put these on here. Now I put the rubber heels on the heel base before I put them on the shoe so that I could sand the breast. The breast is that's what it's called. The breast is the section of the boot right in there. And so we'll do that first because when you put it on, it's really hard to get to that area. Now, remember when I told you these had washers in the rubber? So technically, you don't need to put glue on there. Some people glue it, some people don't glue it. I personally put it on there, get the glue, and when the glue is wet, I'll nail it to it. Because they're right, you don't really need glue because the nails get countersunk into it and holds it there very nicely. But it's just something extra I do. And so when it's on there wet, it gives it time to dry and bond properly. These are rubber heel nails. It's a little bit thicker of a nail, and it just helps to, it's designed for these rubber heels. Hence the rubber heel nail. And then we'll take and countersink them, just a little punch. and I'll show you what this looks like once I'm done. Just like that. And so we'll sand this breast, we'll dye it brown, and then we'll glue it onto the shoe. Okay, there you go. We got that breast all cleaned up, ready to go. And now let's go ahead and stick it on. Make sure it's in the right spot, nice and straight, not crooked. Right. Now, come over here to my heel wheel, which if you want to know more about this machine, go watch my last video about the ball nailer. I kind of go over this machine in that video. But those threaded nails we took out, this is what puts them back in. So we just line it up. So that put 6 nails right in the front. Now I'm going to do the same thing in the back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nails in the back section of the heel. And now this heel is not going anywhere. Now we just gotta do our final sand, dye the edges, condition and clean the uppers, and we're ready to go. All right, so when it comes to dyeing the edges, this is what I use. Angelus Brown Luster Cream. I don't know, but it actually works very well for putting on edges. I've already done a couple coats. Depending on how dark you want to do it. You put 1 coat for light brown, multiple coats for a darker brown. And then you let that dry. Then you buff it off. And you clean, condition, and the boots are just about ready to go. Alrighty, so we're just about done with these boots. We just gotta clean and condition the uppers. Now you see it's got a lot of dark spots on there. Now, there's not really much I could do for that, unfortunately, at least to my knowledge. I tried cleaning it off with some acetone and tried to lighten it up, and it doesn't really do anything. So, like I said, if you guys know of any way to get those off, I'd be very happy to know. But this is what I use: Angelus Exotic Leather Cleaner and Conditioner. It's a spray bottle. It's a spray, and you spray the boots. Now it's gonna darken boots, and that's just because it's dry. Or that's because it's wet. So once it dries up, it'll go back to its normal color. But this just does a really good job at moisturizing the leather. And like you see, I'm using my hands. It doesn't really do anything to my hands. All right, now we're gonna let that dry. You can see the toes, and it doesn't look good at all, but once it dries, it'll go back to its natural color. Alrighty, so after the boots dried, you see the dark marks are still there, but like I said, I can't really do much about them. But the leather's conditioned, moisturized. We buffed the edges. And yes, I shaved. It was getting really annoying. But there you go. These are the Vibram 430 soles. The Vibram Cowboy heels. Now this is going to be the same process with pretty much any sole that you go and want to use, whether it be leather or another rubber sole. But just wanted to make a video showing you guys the step-by-step process of how we resole cowboy boots. And if you guys enjoyed this, make sure to like it, subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you and have a beautiful day.